Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We're doing it live right here. Weekdays at 4 in the afternoon. We do more at 4. The news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. What a week. Stocks ending the week at record highs. The Dow and the S&P 500, each ending at record highs today after the big Wall Street banks, J.P. Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo, reported earnings that came in better than expected, and those stocks rallied. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of more than 400 points, settling at 42,864. That is a record high close for the blue chip index. The S&P 500 gained 35 points, settling at 5,815. That, too, is a record high. The NASDAQ also in the plus column today of 61 points at 18,343. Looks like the yield in the 10-year note has moved higher this week, impacting fixed-rate mortgage rates. In fact, that bond yield up for the fourth week in a row. We did get new readings on inflation this week. Gold got a pop today, now just below $2,700 an ounce again. I'll discuss that and more with Axel Merck this hour, CEO and CIO of Merck Investments, which includes the VanEck Merck Gold ETF. Interestingly, oil prices easing this week. Natural gas futures today also posted a loss of nearly 8% for the week, with demand taking a hit due to power outages caused by Hurricane Milton, which ravaged Florida this week, just a couple of weeks after Hurricane Helene also impacted the state. Milton made landfall on the Florida West Coast on Wednesday, left more than 3 million people in Florida without power, and the recovery effort there continues. The financial stocks in focus today. Shares of the ETF that focuses on stocks in the financial sector were moving higher at or near a record high at the close today. New reading on consumer confidence today from the University of Michigan's Consumer Confidence Survey, moving lower this past month. Tesla also in the spotlight. Had that big event last night at Warner Brothers Studios with Elon Musk there, the We Robot event, the cyber taxi event. I'll discuss that big story with Southern California-based automotive and business journalist Richard Saxton, who will be joining me live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, crypto too, and the whole works. Joining us live now, the one and only John Najarian. Dr. J, as he's known, of the major financial networks, co-founder of Market Rebellion, co-author of It's Not an Option, among his latest books. He also has the laser eyes on, too, following the cryptos. John Najarian, thank you very much for joining us live here to cap off this very eventful week.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and especially when the market is cooperating as it has been for the last several weeks, Frank. So thank you very much.
Amazing time, certainly, for the markets, and that wall of worry certainly can be said has been climbed. John, give us your reaction to this record-setting performance on such an anxious week.
Well, when we kick off the earnings season with J.P. Morgan and Wells Fargo both exceeding street expectations, even though these, like the net interest income and things like that, were not at the sort of numbers that you might think would justify rallies like those two stocks have had in the last 12 hours. I'd say it was really just people breathing a sigh of relief that things are still good at these two global banks. And now they're looking forward to what are we going to get out of Bank America, Citi, and the rest of them as the earnings season really gets into full swing in the next 10 days.
And look at this, J.P. Morgan Chase of nearly $10 today at 222 and change. Wells Fargo also coming alive here at more than 3 at 60.99. Do you expect more good things in the bank sector here?
Well, in a word, yes. The chargebacks for some of the credit card companies could be worrisome because clearly consumers that are using these buy now, pay later services like Affirm, AFRM, and Klarna, people using those two are getting around things that would otherwise cause their credit scores to perhaps be negatively impacted. And so instead, they've availed themselves of those buy now, pay laters. That seems to have helped a lot with the chargebacks and charge-offs that otherwise these banks might incur. So that's positive. And obviously Citi has a pretty big portfolio of both credit card as well as banking functions with society. And I think both of these will be very strong going forward, Citi and Bank America, because some of the refis and some of the mortgage business, even though we actually saw, as you correctly called, interest rates tick up this week and thus mortgage rates went up, they had been coming down for the last several weeks. So this is the first week we've actually seen interest rates go up. I would anticipate that that's going to result in people not filing for those refis and so forth next week. But if they come back down in the next week to 10 days, I do think that the future looks pretty bright for the mortgage brokers in a Fed cutting environment.
All right, let's get to some of the exciting stuff here now. Cryptos. Bitcoin has rebounded from its recent lows and right now is above 62,000 once again. Ethereum up around 2,400 I see here. Doge at 11 cents. What are your thoughts about what's happening in the crypto space here at the moment?
Well, there is some focus on some of these fraudsters, as there always is. It's not just crypto, but elsewhere. But despite that fact, the reason I think that they were weaker earlier in the week, in particular, notably Bitcoin, when it broke 59,000 and traded back down into the 58,000 range, I think that was because interest rates had crossed, the 10-year had crossed back over 4%. And again, a no-yield instrument like Bitcoin or like gold doesn't do as well in that environment. But as, again, you and I have said multiple times over the past several months, gold has continued to hold, and it's backing and filling and going higher. And it seems that Bitcoin is just in a range from roughly 57 to about 64, with a tighter range than that being perhaps 58 to 62. And we're right in that range right now for the lead digital asset.
What are your thoughts about how the Bitcoin ETFs have performed this year, as well as the Ethereum ETFs for that matter?
Well, the Ethereum ones are newer, but I think both have shown a lot of resiliency. They've shown that the consumers that don't want to have to have hardware or software wallets in order to hold their Bitcoin and instead can hold them in a stock account, owning an exchange-traded fund or ETF, that has been as popular as many of us thought it would have been. If I were to highlight anything that was negative this week, Frank, I would say it's the news after the bell that Boeing is going to be cutting some 17,000 jobs. When that news hit the tape, that was not very well received. And I believe most of the damage would have been after the bell for that one. But of course, when a massive employer like Boeing talks about a restructuring and the fact that they're losing money from the strike that is ongoing and that they pulled their offer that they had on the table, that is something that we will be talking about into next week, and I'm sure for weeks to come. That is not a positive right there.
That's a very important point. Boeing did participate in the rally today, the blue chip rally. Boeing was up more than $4 at 151 and change, and has slipped about 1% in after-hours trading on that big news you rightly mentioned here, John Najarian, that Boeing will cut 17,000 jobs, delay first deliveries of its 777X jetliner by a year, and record $5 billion in losses in the third quarter as Boeing continues to spiral during a month-long strike. So heading into the new week, that is certainly going to be very much in getting attention heading into the new week. The banks will be closed on Monday. It's Columbus Day, but the markets will be open. So we have one of these quasi-holidays next week.
Yeah, and quasi-holiday today, of course, at the end of, as we hit, I guess, tomorrow, but we're not trading tomorrow. So we end up the Jewish holidays tomorrow or tonight, and I think there will be a resurgence of trading volumes as there usually is in the Monday and Tuesday after the Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah holidays that we've just experienced.
Right. The old Wall Street adage, what is it, buy Rosh Hashanah, sell Yom Kippur, that worked. That worked this year, right?
Yep, it did.
Isn't that something?
And some of these things that really have no good explanation just get the sell in May and go away. If you come up with something catchy, just like a tune for a song, people will pay attention to it. And obviously, in both cases, sell in May and go away, that didn't work, but they paid attention to it. And a lot of people missed out. But as far as sell Yom Kippur and buy Rosh Hashanah, that seems to be a pretty good adage.
Right. Certainly the wisdom of the ages here. We're on the air live with John Najarian. And John, Tesla, of course, made that big splash with the news last night, unveiling that cyber taxi. And that was certainly big news. Tesla stock, though, pulled into reverse today by about 9%. What are your thoughts about that big event and Tesla stock here?
Well, I think Elon Musk had a very impressive presentation. However, including that robo van, which looked amazing. But when he talks about those not being delivered until 26, 27, in other words, at least 2 years, perhaps 3 into the future, that's not going to get a lot of people excited. Wall Street will be a forward-looking instrument, if you will. You know, people buying stocks are looking for, growth in the companies that they're buying over the next several weeks and months. But looking out that far into the future, I think that was one of the things that sort of bit Mr. Musk, was that it's a little too far out into the future. Perhaps this is one of the reasons that some of the people have been departing Tesla as of late, because they'd rather not be there, and promising to deliver something, or at least anticipation was strong that these would be delivered in the 2025 timeframe. That is not the case, and instead pushing that out 2 years or more is something that Mr. Musk might be able to handle, but I think a lot of his other higher-ups in the C-suite were not happy about that.
And the stock taking a hit on all that you just described. On the air live with John Najarian. And, of course, tensions running very high in the Middle East. We've been on that story all week. And, of course, oil production also disrupted in the Gulf of Mexico, with Milton slamming into the west coast of Florida, the second storm in the last couple of weeks to do that. John, surprisingly, oil did pull back a bit. Natural gas also, by the way, and I mentioned one of the reasons there. But what do you see ahead in the energy patch in the face of all that?
Well, I think overall in the energy patch, you're going to see some volatility. There's just like the VIX for the S&P 500, there's a VIX, or a volatility metric, for crude oil futures, and that's known as the OVX. And the OVX was up through 50 this week, meaning that it's more than twice as volatile as the S&P 500. Makes sense, because it's a single instrument versus a smoothed 500 stock index, so that's not terribly surprising. But we hit some very high numbers this week in terms of that volatility, so I think people are paying attention. High volatility doesn't necessarily mean the markets go up or down. It just means there's a lot of uncertainty, and we both know why that is. Is Israel going to continue to go into Lebanon, for instance? Are they going to eventually do something to stem the tide of missiles and arms coming from Iran? The idea that they might do either of those two things is why crude oil is already $9 or $10 higher than it was 3 weeks ago.
On there live with John Najarian. Is there a big crypto conference coming up, John? Is the one with our buddy Charlie Gasparino coming up pretty soon?
Well, we were going to be doing a big conference in Florida this week, but it got washed out, so to speak. We thought better of it, given the fact that even though it was hitting on the western side of Florida, that trailing edge can do a lot of damage, disrupt a lot of travel for people. So, yeah, Charlie Gasparino, Liz Clayman, so many great speakers were going to be there. We've had to reschedule it for November 17th, 18th, and 19th. Same place, South Florida, but we're hoping that we get less volatility out of the weatherman and the weather systems in the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow, that was a important and tough call, but probably a wise call under the circumstances there. Florida in those kind of storms, no fun at all. And, of course, in a very serious situation like that, looks like almost the entire state was under a storm watch or warning. So that's great to hear that it's been rescheduled there, John, and hope to see you there. And is Satoshi Nakamoto going to show up there too?
Well, it depends. If the person that HBO has named as Satoshi, then perhaps. But otherwise, no. I think Satoshi is likely to stay as disguised and anonymous as he has up until this point.
That's fantastic. For anyone that wants more information about that conference and anything else you're doing these days, John, what's the best way to get that information?
I guess just go on over to marketrebellion.com/get started, and you could see all of the various events that we've got on the board.
Well, fantastic. And your book, it's not an option. How's the book doing? And give us some exciting news in the options world here.
Well, the news is that volatility, like I say, uncertainty is what is reflected in that higher volatility, and it's certainly a lot higher than it was 2 months ago when it was closer to 12. But this week it got up to 22, 23. It's hovering at that $20 or 20 level right now. So I would think people are going to be paying attention to, obviously, the polls and the election, and we all kind of hope that we get a decision one way or the other fairly soon after the votes. In other words, I don't think it should take as long to tally these votes as it has taken in the past. Hopefully they can get around that this time, Frank.
Absolutely, John. Well, thank you very much for taking the call to wrap up this record-shattering week. I've been speaking to John Najarian, Dr. J, as he's known on the major financial networks, co-founder of Market Rebellion, the co-author of It's Not an Option, also on X, formerly known as Twitter, and John Najarian. John, great to have you with us. We wish you a great weekend and hope to talk to you again very soon.
Thank you very much, Frank. Talk to you soon.
Righto. Thank you very much. And right to the freeways we go now here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Heading into the weekend, we're at record highs for both the Dow and the S&P 500. Break out the champagne here now. The Dow 410 points, 42,864, record high close. S&P 500 of 35 at 58.15. The NASDAQ of 61 at 18,343. The yield in the 10-year note has been inching higher, and it, in fact, moved higher again today, sending the average 30-year fixed-rate mortgage to the highest we've seen in weeks. The yield in the 10-year note now is at 4.10%. Taking a look at the price of gold, it, too, got a pop today up nearly $35 at $2,674.20 an ounce. I'll talk about that with gold expert Axel Merck, who'll be joining me live here shortly. Bank stocks getting a rise today. J.P. Morgan Chase up more than $9 at $222 and change. Wells Fargo up more than $3 at $60.99. Earnings reports. Shares of Uber moving up today by 11%. Tesla on the flip side among the big losers, down 9% today following that big Tesla event with Elon Musk at Warner Brothers Burbank last night. I'll talk about that with Richard Saxon coming up. LA-based automotive and business journalist will be joining me live to talk about what happened last night and what happened today in reaction to that big robo-taxi event. We did see the price of oil slip today, right now down 36 cents at $75.49 in New York. Brent crude in London, the global benchmark, pulling back 25 cents at $78.79 a barrel. Checking the cryptos now, we see Bitcoin right now down about 600 at 62,484. Ethereum down 16 at 2,441. And Doge at the moment at 11 cents. After the closing bell, Boeing out with a tough announcement. They plan to cut 17,000 jobs and delay first deliveries of its 777X jetliner by a year and book a $5 billion loss in the third quarter. The company's CEO, Kelly Ortberg, said in a message to employees that Boeing must shrink its workforce to align with our financial reality after an ongoing strike. stopped production of its 737 MAX, 767, and 777 jets. Boeing shares down about 2% in after-hours trading. The stock was up about $4 during regular trading today. And now the latest news for you here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Good afternoon. New readings on inflation this week coming in hotter than expected at the consumer level. The Consumer Price Index showed inflation in September was higher than expected, even though overall price growth largely continued on a cooling path. Today, the latest reading on wholesale inflation came in unchanged in the month of September. The price of gold, meanwhile, voting by moving higher, up nearly $35 today at $2,674 and change. Gold recently hit a record high above $2,700 an ounce. Silver also has been popping this year. Let's bring in the expert now, Axel Merk, CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Merk Investments, which includes the VanEck Merk Gold ETF. Axel Merk, thank you very much for coming to the line this afternoon.
Great to be with you, Frank.
Wonderful to have you with us here, Axel, and want to get your impressions. You're also an economist, and Sustainable Wealth is your book, by the way, and let's get your impressions here on these latest inflation readings and the impact we're seeing in the financial markets, especially in the precious metals markets this week.
Well, I think you hit it on the nail, right? Inflation is on a downward trend, but a tad higher than expected. But the story is in the price of gold, and let's dive into that a little bit. A few weeks ago, Fed Chair Powell gave another victory speech. He wouldn't call it such, but basically saying, hey, we got inflation under control, and therefore we'll focus on unemployment. And so when then the next inflation print is a tad worse than expected, the market doesn't take it all that seriously, in the sense that the market, not that the Federal Reserve will suddenly be much tighter. And if you look at the latest jobs report, you would have thought that maybe the Federal Reserve will pause and not cut rates anymore this year, but there is still another rate cut priced in November and almost another one in December. So the market for the time being thinks that the Federal Reserve will march lower. In the meantime, the markets, notably precious metals, seem to like it. If you look at the bond market, that one has been selling off gradually, nothing dramatic, but also suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the Federal Reserve has lost a little bit focus on this inflation thing. And obviously, the context is that we have elections coming up. One of the things that was the highest in the CPI numbers was car insurance. Anybody who has renewed car insurance in recent months will have said, oh my God, what is happening? On the flip side, odds are that heating costs this winter will be a little lower than expected, but that's going to be after the election, and the current administration is not going to be benefited from the sigh of relief that might come in the middle or at the end of the winter.
Recently, the big story was a weak dollar, which was also getting the credit for propelling the stock market higher, since when the dollar is weak, that makes our stuff less expensive overseas. So the big multinational companies benefit from all this. You're also a currency expert, and give us an update on what you're seeing in the currency markets here.
Sure. I'd like to remind people that when we talk about the dollar, the so-called dollar index that's most often quoted has almost 60% euro. And the euro had been quite strong compared to its recent past or even years past, with expectations that the Federal Reserve is going to cut quite substantially and the Europeans not so much. And the change in recent weeks has been that, well, maybe the Federal Reserve is only going to cut 25 basis points at the next meeting. And in Europe, numbers have been lackluster, so the euro is back below 110. It was almost at 112, and it's almost at 109 right now. And so the dollar has strengthened a bit, but of course the neutral currency that you can't print, so to speak, the price of gold has been reaching highs here, right? I mean, we are currently, as we speak, at 26.57 on the spot market, and that's quite substantial, right? And by the way, the reason for that is, in my view anyway, aside from Federal Reserve not being all that focused on inflation, more relevant is that both our lovely candidates that we have in the November election, they don't exactly have fiscal discipline as their top priority. Let me just put it this way.
Understood. Now look at the price of gold, which you track very, very closely. And Since the start of this year, gold up 29% over the past year, up 37%. When was the last time we saw a move like this in the price of gold?
Well, the price of gold can, of course, be very, very volatile. And if one thing that hasn't happened is downward volatility. That's something that can, of course, happen as well when things go up. But yes, once the price of gold go up, that can easily be amplified with speculators jumping on it. Part of the reason why volatility actually hasn't been all that great is because the folks that chase the volatility have been in the meme stocks, digital assets, AI stocks. And so in some ways, despite the rise in the price of gold, we haven't seen the sort of frenzy in gold that you would typically see, notably also in the gold miners. Aside from investing in gold, we extensively invest in gold miners. And especially the junior miners are only slowly waking up. And I can't give investment advice on the FIA, but it's the dynamics are such that historically anyway, that they tend to play catch up and tend to be much more volatile. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be some fireworks here at some point. But that said, it's a very volatile space, and anything can, of course, happen.
Right. Gold, of course, safe haven, considered a safe haven on inflation, as well as geopolitical uncertainty. And we're certainly seeing plenty of that to go around, right?
Yes, just a few comments on that maybe. Historically, and I think I mentioned this on your program, I don't like it so much when we reference gold as the safe haven for geopolitical uncertainty because the market gets used to this stuff. Now, at the same time, I think what's happening these days in both Ukraine and the Middle East, I think they're a reflection of a new era that we're in, and it might be overall pushing a more longer-term support on the price of gold, simply because the geopolitical landscape is much, much less stable than it has been. And as much as I like to kind of call gold a safe haven, the one thing it is also sometimes correlated to is what's happening in China. And the reason is that when the Chinese, and tomorrow morning there's going to be a big announcement, at least the market anticipates that on the next stimulus in China, the price of gold may react to that because when the Chinese give a stimulus that has a global impact, then it can have spillover effects to our markets, including the price of gold.
What are your thoughts about the gold miners here? I see you recently had a webinar on that subject. What about the gold miners and all this?
Well, they have done well year to date, quite well. And if it wasn't the space, you would say extraordinarily well. But given how much the price of gold has moved, the earnings of the producers have gone through the roof and are likely to be very, very high. And the analysts in that community, they tend to be very, very slow in updating the earnings estimates because their models, they are not inclined to do what many of the gold bugs do to chase the price of gold. So they tend to dampen expectations, which means if the price of gold stays up here, the earnings power of these miners and these gold prices tends to be rather substantial. And when you go down to kind of the developer and exploration companies, in many ways, you're buying an option on them finding gold, on them being able to develop a mine. And of course, when the market is more favorable, money is more available for them to complete those developments. And so they tend to be notoriously more volatile than these companies. So you can see some mind-boggling returns. Now, again, it's a very volatile space. I'm not suggesting everybody should put their money into that. But given where the price of gold has moved, I think the gold miners have dramatically held back, so to speak, which of course means either the price of gold will at some point come back, or these gold miners, in my view, will catch up. I happen to be more in the latter camp, but that's obviously not a guarantee of any sort.
So, Axel, thank you very much for your thorough analysis as always here. We appreciate it. Always great to speak with you. That is Axel Merk, the CEO and Chief Investment Officer at Merk Investments, which includes the VanEck Merk Gold ETF. MerkInvestments.com. Axel, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
My pleasure.
And right out to the freeways now, 790 KABC. Frank Mottek here, folks. Did you know that for more than 10,000 years, gold has been the greatest store of value and considered a safe haven asset to preserve your wealth? Now with the U.S. debt at more than $35 trillion and climbing, not to mention the Biden administration getting us involved in costly wars, developing the digital dollar, central bank digital currency, and inflation spiraling out of control, it's more critical now than ever before to safeguard your assets like your cash savings and retirement accounts with physical gold. Opening a gold IRA is one of the best ways to secure your wealth and create a stable financial future. Stop worrying about your retirement or the market and cash savings of the bank. Feel confident, prepared, and in control with physical gold and silver. Give Joe Morgan a call at 1-800-753-8534. Mention Frank Mottek, Mottek On Money, and you can get $1,000 worth of silver with a qualifying purchase. Call now, 1-800-753-8534, or visit UnitedGoldGroup.com. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Psst, psst, taxi. Tesla Cybercab pulling up fast at Warner Brothers Studios last night. Elon Musk on site as well. The Tesla Robo-Taxi, as he calls it, right there. Big unveiling last evening. Tesla stock, though, slipping into reverse in reaction to that big event. Let's bring in the expert on all this, Southern California-based automotive and business journalist Richard Saxton. Long time watching for years, Richard, on FNN here in Los Angeles. It's great to have you with us live on the air with us here this afternoon.
Yeah, great to be here, Frank. Big deal at Warner Brothers last night for the Cybercab. But the reason Tesla stock, I think, was down today because Elon Musk makes a lot of promises and predictions that seem to get a little bit delayed, though he is saying that this robo-taxi Cybercab will be in production in 2026 and out no later than 2027, a few years away. So if he keeps up with that prediction, then maybe the stock will go back up. But he said you can also buy this self-driving vehicle for about $30,000. So we'll have to see if that comes in where he's hoping. But self-driving cars are now huge, as you know. In fact, today I was on Venice Boulevard and 3 Waymo self-driving cars. That's a company now owned by Alphabet. We're just, you look, it's crazy. You're on the LA streets, you look in and no driver. They're driving themselves autonomously around. And, you know, I've got friends that have the Tesla Model 3, and he tells me that the car is driving him all over Southern California. So I have friends that have utilized the self-driving autonomous features, and he's pretty happy with it, though as a passenger, I've been kind of nervous sitting in the passenger seat just watching the car drive, but it's effective, and we never get into accidents. So maybe Elon has something going here.
I guess the big thing Elon's got going, at least he's going to save money on steering wheels. This new taxi doesn't have a steering wheel, right? Which the Waymo cars do, which are Jaguars, right? From what I've noticed, seeing those things drive around.
Jaguars, yeah, they are Jaguars, the Waymo, which is pretty impressive. Jaguar autonomous cars, but. Yeah, and I don't think the Cybercabs, in addition to not having steering wheels, don't have pedals either. I think that was one of the points Elon made last night. So, and he had about 20 of those Cybercabs for people to drive around the Warner Brothers lot. I think he had maybe another 30 Model 3s that you could also take an autonomous drive around. But I remember, Frank, it was over 15 years ago. I was at the Frankfurt Auto Show in Frankfurt, Germany. And Elon was there with his little tiny roadster that had a price of $109,000, and you could drive them. And my first website article was on the Model S, which was 15 years ago. My website's been around 15 years, how time flies. And the Model S took 2-3 years from that introduction to come out. It came out in 2012, and now Elon is saying he's going to have a new roadster, too, a 4-passenger roadster for about $50,000, which is going to be amazing. 620-mile range and a top speed of 250 miles an hour. I don't know where you could take it that fast, but Elon has a lot of promises. Let's see if they come to fruition. He has done an amazing job innovating so many products that just are inspiring and into the future.
No question about that. And that great website you mentioned, happy anniversary, by the way, SaxtonOnCars.com. And, of course, Richard Saxton, a familiar voice on this program during the auto shows and during the Milken Institute Global Conference. And now this big story here with this cyber cab. And of course, the cyber trucks get a lot of attention out there. Once these cabs hit the road, they're gonna steal the spotlight, right?
Yeah, they look a lot. I mean, it looks like the cyber cab kind of came from the the cyber truck that I now see driving around in my neighborhood quite frequently. I don't know if it's the same guy or if there's multiple cyber trucks around, but yeah, we do see them with that flashy silver distinct look. So the cyber cab may be somewhat similar. There's also, I think, a cyber van that was also introduced that'll be able to take up to about 20 people. So, Elon's really looking into the mass transit, autonomous kind of robo-taxi service. As you probably heard, too, outside of the automotive last night, they also had some actual robots that Elon claims could probably babysit your daughter. I don't know if you want to go with a robot babysitter, but he had them there.
Isn't that something? Well, when I go out with my daughter, it's fun to spot cyber trucks. It's always she usually spots them first, and then so she's in the lead right now. But it's certainly a lot of fun, and certainly safety a big concern with these autonomous vehicles, as you've already noted, Richard Saxton. But Elon Musk himself said the autonomous vehicles are expected to be 10 to 20 times safer than human-driven vehicles, and could cost as little as 20 cents per mile compared to the $1 per mile for city buses. What's your reaction to that assessment?
Well, Elon has been saying that for years, that the autonomous driving technology that he has, is safer than humans. And the competitor, I don't know if it's a competitor, but Waymo, has these, as you and I have just talked about, the autonomous vehicles driving around the Jaguars with nobody at the driver's seat. In fact, nobody in the car at all. And they're driving around the roads of LA and San Francisco and actually completing trips. So if Waymo is an example that it can be done, they're doing it.
Pretty amazing. The fact is, we've probably had safe self-driving cars around in LA for quite some time. You just drive around, you see people putting on makeup, fiddling with their radio and fiddling with things in the car. So that's sort of self-driving, right?
Yeah, it is. No, I'm telling you, my buddy who has a Model 3, you have to pay extra. Tesla drivers know this to get the fully autonomous features in the car. It's an extra, software download on a regular basis and more bells and whistles in your Tesla. But he drives it all over. He's driven it up to the Bay Area, all over. He lets the car do the driving. And I've been a passenger in it while he's driving around Southern California, and the car changes lanes, signals, stops, It is essentially self-driving today, and it's been around for a while. But now it's going to be without a driver in the driver's seat. The car will be totally in control.
Yeah, and you were at the Orange County Auto Show, right? What were the big takeaways there, briefly?
It was interesting. The media segment wasn't too busy, but they had a lot of nice vehicles there, and it had an electric push to it. And I interviewed the head of the Orange County Automobile Dealers Association there, and he said that EV sales have somewhat leveled. They've and also, as we know, because of Tesla stock, that Tesla's sales, I think this year, will have its first annual sales decline, kind of a sales slump for EVs. So it's kind of leveled off. I think all the initial people that wanted it are in, and now you got to convince mainstream to get into electric vehicles. But I will say from the show, hybrids are huge. Hybrids are being made, like Toyota now has.
Terrific, Richard. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to speaking with you again soon. Richard Saxton, his website, saxtononcars.com. Congratulations on the 15th anniversary of that site and for sharing your expertise with us. Richard Saxton, California-based automotive and business journalist, live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
Every week, Michael Rosenbaum is getting deep with someone new on the Inside of You podcast. Actor James Marsters.
Are you somewhat content? Do you still stress a lot?
If anything, I feel guilty that I have it so good. If you make the decision to be an actor, the deal is poverty. I don't understand. How did I get here? And the answer, how did I get here, is really one audition one day for Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, wherever you listen.